I'm Evelyn Rowe, 66, a retired public school librarian who still labels her spice jars and straightens picture frames. At 5:02 on Thanksgiving evening this year, I stepped into my son's house in Maple Grove, Ohio, holding warm cornbread and a hope you carry like a fragile dish. The dining room glowed with pillar candles. 10 chairs circled a polished table. 11 people were expected. Outside, the maples had shed their last leaves, and the porch smelled like wet rope and cinnamon. I set the cornbread on the sideboard and reached for the chair near the window. Kayla, my daughter-in-law, moved quicker, pinched 2 fingers on the chair back, and slid it away from me with a scrape across hardwood. "This seat isn't for you," she said, smiling for the centerpiece, not my face. Daniel, my son, stood behind her with a serving bowl of mashed potatoes and a look that avoided mine. His mother-in-law, Linda, adjusted a fork and praised symmetry. Someone put a TV tray in the kitchen. The radio in there murmured old country songs to a single folding chair. The dining room erupted with clinks and camera-ready laughter while I balanced my plate above the trash can to catch cranberry drips. Through the doorway, Noah and Avery craned their necks toward me, then turned back at a warning look. I swallowed a tear that burns. When the pie emerged and the candles were relit for pictures, I slipped my coat on. No one stopped me. No one asked why the cornbread sat untouched. I told the hallway, "Happy Thanksgiving," because hallways keep secrets. At the door I paused, counted the chairs again, and felt the scrape echo in my ribs. I promised myself, soft as a prayer, that I would never eat alone in a kitchen again, not in this family, not while I still knew my own name. The road home ran black and shiny, a ribbon of rain left by clouds. I kept both hands at 10 and 2, the cornbread cooling on the back seat like a promise no one wanted. A yellow light at Maple and 3rd caught me, and words rose anyway. I pulled into the empty lot by the lakeside park and let the engine tick. Window cracked, breath fogging a pale oval. Rain tapped the windshield, steady as a metronome. I exhaled. I opened the voice memo app and spoke like I was shelving books again, sorting fact from feeling. 11 people, 10 chairs. Kayla moved the chair, not Daniel. The sentence was, "This seat isn't for you." Kitchen had a radio, old country. I ate alone. Saying it out loud made the air steadier. I added the part no one saw. Noah and Avery looked over. Linda praised symmetry. I closed my eyes and felt the scrape travel down my spine. Back home, I put the untouched cornbread on my counter and got out the notebook I call my truth ledger. I wrote the time I arrived, the order of the dishes, the moment I was redirected, exactly what I said to the hallway. I am old enough to know that memory edits for comfort. Paper doesn't. I made tea and typed a message to Daniel that did not scold or beg. "Can we meet tomorrow at Lakeside Diner? Noon. I want to talk calmly about last night and what has to change." I watched the dots appear and vanish. He replied, "Yes. Mom, I'm sorry." Noon works. I set my phone face down, turned off the kitchen light, and stood in the doorway listening to the quiet, already rehearsing the first sentence I would say when I saw my boy. Lakeside Diner wore the smell of hot coffee and maple syrup like a good coat. Daniel was already in a booth, shoulders rounded, his phone face down like mine had been. He stood to hug me, a quick, awkward press that belonged to an earlier version of us. Janelle poured coffee and asked about pie. We both said no. I slid my notebook across the table but didn't open it. "I want to say what happened without blaming you for everything," I began. "But I won't pretend it didn't hurt." Daniel nodded, rubbing the vinyl seam with his thumb. "Kayla's mom has opinions," he said. "It felt easier to let them run the room than make a scene." "Easier for whom?" He flinched, swallowed. "Not for you," he said. "I'm sorry." "I don't need a speech," I said, keeping my tone even. "I need a plan. No more kitchen exile. If there aren't enough chairs, we add one. If the table is full, kids get their own table, but adults stay together. We can alternate Sundays between your house and mine. And when someone crosses a line, we address it in the room. I watch the words land like place cards. Daniel straightened. "Okay," he said, more spine in his voice. "This Sunday we'll host, and I'll make sure there's a seat for you at the table." He hesitated. "I was proud you walked out before pie. It told me the line was real." I folded the napkin and refolded it. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. When the check came, he grabbed it without a fight. Outside, the wind cut sharp off the lake, and I felt something steadier take the shape of a chair in my chest. Boats knocked softly at their moorings. Gulls cried overhead once. Saturday came with a winter sun that makes everything look cleaner. I swept my small kitchen, not because it needed it, but because movement loosens knots. At the community center, the widows group circled up with paper cups of coffee. Renee, in her red scarf, said, "Sometimes power shifts by a single chair leg." We laughed, then let it sit. I wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it inside my wallet. After group. I drove to the home store on Franklin. I compared folding chairs the way I compare additions. Hinges, weight, how they feel when you commit. I chose a steel one with a padded seat that didn't squeak. I opened and closed it 3 times until the hinge felt honest. The clerk, a college kid with chipped black polish, carried it to my trunk. "Big party?" he asked. "Just the right number of chairs," I said, and he grinned without asking more. On the way home, I bought a deep red table runner, the color of late apples. The runner's weave caught the light like calm water. At the grocery, I bought buttermilk and cornmeal. Some rituals repair what apologies cannot. Back in my kitchen, I stirred batter and let the cast iron heat until it shimmered. The smell rose like a good memory you can touch. I covered the pan with foil and wrote Kayla on a masking tape label because kindness costs only ink. Before bed, I laid out Jack's handkerchief. Not for tears. Not anymore. I tucked it into my purse beside the house key and the sticky note. I set an alarm, then another. Tomorrow I would arrive early, breathe slow, and choose my place at the table the way a person chooses a sentence that will change the paragraph that follows. Sunday afternoon smelled like roasted thyme from the vents before I even rang the bell. I was early by 15 minutes, a gift to my own breathing. Kayla opened the door with brightness and a ring of keys that jingled. "You're early," she said, then stepped aside. The table wore a white cloth and tea candles. In the center sat a card that read, "Reserved in gold script." "Who's that for?" I asked, light as a napkin. "For the turkey," she said, smoothing the runner. Linda appeared with a glass pitcher and the satisfaction of one who knows where things should go. "We'll need the nook for overflow," Linda noted, looking at me the way librarians look at kids who cut in line. I took my cornbread to the kitchen, unwrapped the foil, and set the pan where the light found it. The garage door drummed. Daniel's SUV pulled in. A moment later, he came through the mudroom holding a familiar folded shape. My chair. He lifted it once, like he was memorizing the weight, then leaned it against the wall near the dining room. "Hey, Mom," he said, meeting my eyes without apology or a joke to deflect the heat. "Hey," I said, and let the greeting be simple. While Kayla placed name cards and Linda fussed with forks, I washed my hands with the kids and asked about their art projects. Noah described a papier-mâché volcano. Avery whispered a secret about glitter. I kept my voice level, my movements economical. No pointed sighs, no rustling theater. When Kayla called, "Dinner's ready," I took one long breath that reached the soles of my feet. I wiped my hands on Jack's handkerchief and walked toward the glow of the dining room, choosing my steps as carefully as setting type. Kayla lifted the turkey and announced, "Everyone, find your place." Name cards faced outward like tiny billboards. I walked to the head of the table, set the reserved card beside the salt, and pulled the chair back. The scrape was firm, not loud. Linda pivoted with the pitcher. "Evelyn, you'll be more comfortable in the breakfast nook," she said, as if comfort were measured in square footage. "I'm comfortable here," I answered. I placed my napkin on my lap and rested palms on the table, feeling the grain under my skin. Noah leaned toward me, then sat up straight after Kayla's quick look. Daniel hovered with the gravy boat, a man who knew balance isn't peace. The room went bright and brittle. Kayla set the turkey on a platter stand near the center, her smile pulled tight at the edges. "Please," she began, voice sweet and staged. "Let's keep the flow clear so we can serve." She glanced at the empty chair near the window, the one she had pulled away on Thursday, as if to offer it as a consolation prize. I stayed. The silence took shape, like dough becoming bread. I lifted the serving fork and waited, not to take first, but to show I was part of the passing. Daniel cleared his throat. The gravy boat clinked a rim. "We can make room," he said, and something in his voice made Kayla stop adjusting napkin corners. He slid the folded chair from the wall, then opened it with a snap and set it beside Noah. He nudged a lantern aside. "There." He looked at me, then at the kids. "We'll pass to Grandma first." I didn't correct the title or rescue anyone from the truth of it. I simply held out my plate for all to see. Daniel kept the gravy boat steady, then set it down and looked at every face like a coach before the last play. "Mom sits here," he said. "If we're short on space, we add a chair. No one eats alone in the kitchen." The words didn't boom. They landed. Kayla's smile held, but her knuckles went white around the carving knife. Linda pursed her lips as if tasting a lemon that wouldn't sweeten. He shifted the lantern, slid the platter an inch, and made the geometry work. "Noah, scoot closer to me," he said. "Avery, you're my right-hand helper." Their chairs whispered against the floor and then settled. I felt the air change temperature, not warmer, just less sharp, like wind moving behind a building. I passed the cornbread to Kayla first. She blinked, surprised, then nodded once. Transactional but real. "All right," she said, voice thinner than before. "Let's serve." Linda lifted the pitcher and poured water with performative care. When the carving began, Kayla placed the first slice on my plate and said, under her breath, "Here you go, Evelyn." Not Mom, not Mrs. Rowe. My name, clean and level. I met her eyes and said, "Thank you," as if the words were bricks and we might yet build something that could take weight. We ate. Conversations restarted and tripped, like foals on long legs. Daniel asked Noah about his science project. Avery told me a joke about a duck and a library fine. The room found its rhythm in small, forgiving beats. The candles flickered but held their small crowns of light. I breathed easier. I didn't raise a toast or explain a boundary. I just sat where I belonged and let my son's sentence do the work, feeling the scrape in my ribs finally fall quiet. The meal moved in currents instead of waves. Noah slid the cranberry sauce toward me, like a mission. Avery handed over the butter in both palms, concentrating as if it might float. I broke the cornbread cleanly and passed pieces around the table, letting my hands learn a calmer route. Kayla chewed and listened more than she directed. Linda's corrections shrank to elbows and napkins, tiny fences no one walked into. Daniel stood to refill water glasses and gathered used dishes before they stacked. He didn't announce it, he just did it. And something about a son serving his own table straightened the room without anyone losing face. When the conversation drifted toward holiday plans, I asked Noah about his volcano and found myself offered the honor of pushing the papier-mâché button later. Small, ordinary gifts began to appear like coins in couch cushions. Kayla caught me watching the candlelight wobble against the runner I bought. "It looks good," she said, following my eyes. "Thank you," I answered. "It ties the room together without shouting." She almost smiled. "I like when things look intentional." "Me too," I said, and left it there. A truce made of fabric and restraint. Dessert arrived with less ceremony than Thursday. No photos, no staged slices. I cut pie for the kids and Linda, who accepted it with the smallest nod of the night. I didn't mention the untouched cornbread from Thanksgiving. I didn't mention my hallway goodbye. It felt better to let the quiet do that work. When plates emptied and the kids asked to be excused, Kayla said yes without checking anyone's face. Daniel stacked chairs, then left my folding chair in place, open, as if it belonged. 2 days later, Kayla texted to meet near the elementary school. We chose a small cafe that serves coffee strong enough to decide. She arrived in a charcoal coat, eyes tired in the way of people who sleep next to to-do lists. We ordered and sat by the window so we could watch parents trade car seats and mittens. I grew up with a mother who believed presentation was a kind of morality, Kayla said, stirring until the spoon tapped glass. If the table looked perfect, the family must be fine. I nodded. "I understand the comfort of straight lines," I said. "After my husband died, I ironed dish towels for a month." She huffed a small laugh. "I shouldn't have moved that chair," she said, "but I panicked about the photos and the mess and my mother's voice. We can make a rule," I offered. "Adults at the main table. If we lack space, we add chairs or start a kids' table. No one eats alone and no one is sent to the kitchen. And," Kayla added carefully, "please don't correct me in front of guests. Take me aside. I don't want to feel ganged up on." I considered the shape of that request and found it fit. "Fair," I said. "I can do that." We agreed to alternate Sundays and text grocery lists so the work didn't stack on one person. If the house is crowded, I'll bring my folding chair without comment. Kayla picked at her cup sleeve. "I like the runner," she said, eyes on the street. "It looks intentional." "That was the goal," I said. When we stood to leave, she hesitated, as if balancing a tray, then said, "Thank you for coming today." "You're welcome," I replied. "I'll see you Sunday." Snow threatened. The first Sunday at my house was windy enough to send leaves skating down the sidewalk. Daniel parked out front and carried the turkey to my oven while I whisked gravy on the stove. Kayla set plates and asked where I keep napkins. I pointed to the drawer by the fridge, and she nodded. Noah folded napkins into triangles. Avery printed names on tent cards with a purple marker. I taped Avery's seating map to the cabinet, a circle of names with mine at the head. No reserved card this time, only chairs that knew what they were for. I placed my folding chair near the corner in case an uncle or neighbor dropped by. We moved around one another without commentary. When a spoon clattered, Daniel said, "I've got it," and did. It felt like we were rehearsing a new language, fewer modifiers, stronger verbs. Kayla looked at my mismatched plates, floral, plain white, blue diner, and said, "I like the stories on these." I told her the blue ones came from a thrifted box after Jack and I paid off the car. She smiled without envy, which startled me kindly. When the doorbell rang, I hoped it was Linda. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, returning a book. I invited her to stay. She declined with a scarf-wrapped wave. I sent her home with pie anyway. At the table, Noah asked the blessing he learned at school. Simple and sturdy. We passed everything left then, right, because the kids decided both was fair. Conversation lifted and settled like a flock. When dessert plates scraped clean, I looked around the table at faces I loved and one I was learning to meet. The radiator hissed, sighed, then settled softly. The extra chair waited against the wall, open, ready. A week later, Noah brought home a flyer for Grandparents' Day and handed it over like a ticket. "Will you come?" he asked, as if I wouldn't. Avery said she was practicing a poem called Chair by the Window and wanted to show me where she'd stand on the risers. I put the flyer on my fridge with an Ohio magnet and marked the date in pen, then brighter pen, because some squares deserve two colors. The school parking lot would fill early, Daniel warned. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the drawer where I keep my truth ledger. The pen hovered until I knew what to save. I wrote about the chair scrape fading like a bruise and about Daniel's sentence that set a new rule in the room. Between 2 pages, I tucked the gold reserved card I'd pocketed on Sunday. Not a gotcha, a record of a custom retired. Daniel texted a photo of Avery's tent card with a crooked star next to my name. She insisted on the star. He wrote, "Says it helps people see better." I told him I'd bring cookies for the class, and he replied, "Of course you will." I typed and erased a longer message about courage, about how love sometimes needs scaffolding, and settled on, "I'm proud of you." He answered, "I'm learning. Thank you for not giving up on us." Before bed, I walked through my quiet kitchen and counted the chairs, 4 around the table, the folding one by the pantry, another in the hall. They made a small constellation. I touched the back of each and felt the rooms they promised. When I turned out the light, the house held steady. The scrape in my ribs was gone. I set an alarm. I slept. A family isn't a table set for pictures. It's the people who make room when space runs out. I didn't win anything so much as refuse to lose myself. The hallway goodbye became a doorway back. We didn't fix every habit, but we wrote a rule that held, if a chair is missing, we add one. Never subtract a person. I keep the gold card tucked away, proof that belonging can be chosen, then practiced, until it feels like breath. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family, drama, and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.